Welcome to 501 Crossroads, your show all about nonprofits and the people that make the mission happen. I'm Marjorie Moore, President and CEO of Mind's Eye, and my personal mission is to make nonprofits stronger by identifying and fixing the rubs that so often come up between people and the mission.
And so I've got a chance to meet one of our keynote speakers at the AFP Conference on Philanthropy. So really excited to talk today to Scott Lange, who is the new CEO and executive partner with Jerold Panas, Linzy and Partners. Scott has over 30 years of leadership experience on the front line as a gift officer, chief development officer, software entrepreneur, and consultant. So, Scott, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a delight. Thank you, Marjorie, for the invitation.
Absolutely. So first, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, born in Ohio, raised in New England, went to school in Pennsylvania, graduated with a degree in political science, which made me eminently qualified for graduate school. And my father asked how I was going to finance that, so I got a job as an admissions representative at Blackburn College in Illinois.
Oh, man.
And that was my first introduction to college university work. 6 months later, got into the advancement profession and have been happily engaged ever since.
So since you started, your early days in advancement in colleges and it looks like some hospitals, what tricks did you learn or tips that you learned in those really early days that you still use today?
Two. At the end of the summer, our Dean of Admissions asked us to identify all the students that qualified for admissions who were accepted and matriculated and separate them from those that we accepted who then went someplace else. Mm-hmm. And we listed every characteristic you could think of: test scores, grade point average, extracurricular activity, whether or not they'd been visited by a faculty member, seen by a student, whether we saw them at a high school fair, etc. At the end of the day, when we categorized the two groups of people, the only distinguishing feature between those that qualified and matriculated and those did not was the quality and quantity of contact.
Wow.
If I met with Mary Beth, if I talked to her family and I got the family to come to campus, 85% of those people actually matriculated. So it was an early lesson in the concept of engagement and communication as a motivator for those who are interested in the educational product we happen to offer.
Absolutely.
But that translated easily to major gift work.
Yeah.
The second lesson came also early on at Roanoke College when I was the director of development. I simply took the list of donors and stacked it on its head, from the family that gave the most money to the family that gave the least, and discovered that there were 35 who generated 90% of our money in the course of a year. And so we were embarking on a campaign, and my charge was simple: to ask each of those to consider doubling what they had done before and to get someone they knew to invite them into the same top-tier donor club. Mm-hmm. So a year later, instead of 35 members, we had 45 members, and we had 50% of the campaign goal.
Wow.
So the concept of the 80-20 rule, the application of connecting and communicating with people, and the value of both in terms of identifying people that share an interest in your mission and vision for the future, I think is paramount to success. Two early lessons, easily and readily identifiable as practical and actionable, that I've just abided by ever since.
Absolutely. And that contact lesson, I think, for people practicing any part of nonprofits, whether it's, with your board or with your volunteers or with your clients, I could see that just having practical applications across the entire sector for everybody that we touch.
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at studies and surveys of attitude and engagement, what you discover is the more people are involved, whether as volunteers or the number of times people from the college, university, hospital, or Boys or Girls Club, YMCA, have visited with them and talked to them about what they're doing and what they want to do, the more they give.
That's amazing. So you're a new hire at Jerold Panas, Linzy and Partners. Jerold Panas is considered the granddaddy of fundraising. And what's it like to be part of that?
It's a humbling experience. It's filled with a great sense of awe, wonder, and responsibility. The charge is to preserve, protect, and promote the body of knowledge that Jerry has developed over the years, and extend that to the next generation. It's remarkable the number of people with whom I come in contact who state that their introduction to our business was either reading one of Jerry's books or attending one of his sessions at the Institute for Charitable Giving. And they're impactful, meaningful, and I think he's actually helped create a generation, if not more than a generation, of fundraising professionals who have a passion about doing good in the world and doing it with excellence and dedication. So it's just a thrill for me, an honor. We've got a wonderful team of partners and professionals at the firm, equally dedicated both to the principles and ethics that he embodies and the mission of the work that our clients are doing, which over time is in excess of 3,900. There are some 12,500 people who've been through the Charitable Giving Institute. So it's remarkable to see. It's just a privilege for me to be a part of that.
That's amazing. So fill in the blank. In the next 2 years, if they let me do blank, this job would be totally worth it.
Well, the job's already totally worth it. That's a given. My desire is that we will infect in a good way another tier of young professionals with enthusiasm and dedication to get into this practice, and that we'll continue to be on the forefront of education and technique. I think that's one of the hallmarks of the firm, our ability to innovate. It was Jerry who had the insight to interview the largest donors in America, and from that interview process, he wrote the seminal work, Mega Gifts. I think at the time, the ethos was that wealthy people gave because there was some sense of guilt for how they acquired their wealth, and B, some value to the tax deduction, that they were in it for some enlightened self-purpose. And the result of his interviews discovered the exact opposite. Number one, they gave because they believed in the mission of the enterprise. Number two, they trusted the leadership of the organization at the board and CEO level. Number three, the organization had a track record of success and efficacy. And fourth, and most important to you and me as development professionals, is they were asked to give.
That's half the battle, right? Yeah. Just doing the ask.
So the tax piece actually ended up, 9 or 10 on a list of about 12 things. And I think that's important to remember. And then that's going to be part of my conversation later in the day about the value proposition of philanthropy. And we see that in healthcare, where it's actually part of the healing process. People want to give back and ensure that others don't suffer the way that someone in their family has had to deal with a particular illness or incident. So it's deeply personal and rewarding, and an avenue for people to fulfill personal philanthropic priorities in an intentional fashion. So being part of this process of extending the body of knowledge that Jerry has created is terrifically rewarding for each of us who are members of the firm.
Absolutely. So there has been actually quite a bit of debate going back and forth lately about the tax deduction for charitable giving. Some people saying, let's take it off the table completely, and some people saying, let's extend it. Both sides of the aisle seem to be saying both things. What do you think would be the impact of either, or would there be an impact?
I'm not politically savvy enough to know. What I can tell you is that our colleagues in the United Kingdom raised money successfully where there is no tax deduction.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
I think that when people see a need, as de Tocqueville noted, we in the Western world, and particularly in America, are inclined to come together and resolve it. We're seeing that in Houston right now with a terrific response to the flood. I was watching this morning where people were showing up with boats at the border to help pull people out. So, personally, I'd like to be able to continue to deduct both my mortgage payment and and a percentage of my charitable contribution. But I don't think that would stop me either from buying a house or making a gift.
Okay, that makes complete sense to me. I know in my personal family, my mom donates because she loves to donate, and my dad goes along with it because he likes a tax deduction. So,
Well, I mean, if it's there, you want to take advantage of it, right? I mean, that's so. I do think it encourages people, and there have been in the estate planning area folks who have considered certain avenues or mechanics for giving because there was an implication that was beneficial to not just themselves, but more importantly, the beneficiary, the philanthropic beneficiary, the charitable beneficiary. But if as we see in the Giving USA statistics, philanthropy tends to track with gross domestic product and the stock market and personal income. If those slope lines go up, charitable giving will go up. And your next listener with an accounting degree will probably be better qualified to address this situation than I, but that's just my take on the issue. I think the biggest issue for each charitable organization to deal with is their case for support. A friend of mine years ago said, Scott, if you were to close your doors tomorrow and no one would notice, what business do you have raising money? And I think he's absolutely correct. We have to be able to demonstrate the value of what we do, the lives we touch, and how the world is a better place because of the skills, the service, the facilities that we provide. That's the overriding issue. If we've got mission, if we have a vision for the future, and we show people a way that they can engage in that, I think success is the only outcome.
Absolutely. So you've got one of those careers that when someone reads your bio, they could begin to wonder how you could have done all of this. I mean,
I'm really old. I started at a young age. Seriously, I think when I got involved in this, I was one of 3 people of whom I'm aware at the time that went directly from college into the advancement profession. I think typically the career path was, become a minister, become a faculty member or administrator, and then glide into this, 10 years later. And I was fortunate at an early age. I was counseled and mentored and tutored by some of the nation's best practitioners of our craft. So part of this is giving back and doing for others the way I was generously given time with the people that were meaningful in my early career.
Absolutely. So you've kind of dipped your toe in and out of the nonprofit sector, kind of going in the for-profit part of the nonprofit sector. What's kept you in this kind of crazy world of fundraising the whole way through?
I think at the core, Marjorie, it's a sense of purpose. I've been fortunate to work with organizations that have really made a difference in the lives of the constituents that they served. Whether it was the University of Missouri or World Hope International, or even my attempt at bringing best practices in major gift fundraising to the table when I designed a prospect management system, a CRM system. The focus has always been the same, and that's to to help others and to indicate that there's a role that each of us can play and should play in having a positive impact by getting personally involved.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So now you've co-founded not just one, but 2 AFP chapters. You didn't learn from the first one how to do that?
Well, it's because I happened to travel and move, right? So when I was in Virginia, my dear friend Mark Whitaker and I co-founded the First Virginia chapter. And then when I moved here to Central Missouri in Columbia and was working at Mizzou, created the Central Missouri chapter.
Nice.
And I've been active in AFP, served on the national board, served as a track dean for the international conference and a speaker at the international conference. And one of the things I think that's unique to this profession is the ability of people and willingness of people to get together, meet on a regular basis, and share best practices. Mm-hmm. Individuals I've met in other professions have not found their professional associations as forthcoming with trade secrets. There's a sense that there's competitive waters, and I believe we as a practice think that a rising tide actually raises all boats. So there's a genuine interest in what each of us is doing at our respective sites that I think brings value both to professional development and to the things we learn that we're able to translate and put in action when we're back behind our own desks working for the organizations we represent. So I think AFP is, has a singular role in that in that world at the local level, and I'm pleased to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's really a great organization, and you're right, you don't see that in all professions. I don't even think that you see it, the collegiality, even in other professional organizations within nonprofits. It seems to be something really special that fundraisers seem to have to be willing to share, which you'd think they'd be the most competitive of us all.
Well, I think we understand that, if you're in higher education, very few people got their undergraduate degree from different places.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
There's usually only one. People that identify with a particular hospital are fairly allegiant to the practitioners there, their surgeon, their doctor, the nursing staff. The same is true of the community-based organizations that people get involved with, whether it's the Y, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Habitat for Humanity, Humane Society. If you're passionate about something and you get involved in that, fortunately, there's an outlet for every personality type and interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat. I love that part about fundraising. I never feel like I'm competing with anybody. It's just, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So one of our favorite props on the show is our Magic 8 Ball. What trends do you think are going to impact fundraisers the most in the next 10 years or so?
So I think we're still wrestling with the impact of Moore's law and technology and the pace at which that brings change in terms of how we interact with people. I don't think we'll ever eliminate the need for personal one-on-one interaction, but I do think we'll continue to find more innovative ways to utilize technology to deliver a message, to engage interested parties, and to steward donors in a fashion that's more efficient and effective and personalized. And in so much as Bill Gates couldn't see the future and Steve Jobs couldn't see the future, the technology just explodes at such a rate. The only thing I can tell you is that 5 years from now, it'll be different.
I think that's a good prediction. So over time, do you think that, obviously foundations have been really big on outcomes and, logic models and all of that kind of stuff over the past, several years. Do you think individual donors, especially at the lower levels, are going to start being even more interested in those things, or they're going to continue to rely on the good work of the nonprofit?
No, I think that's universal. I think every donor wants to know how that their investment was invested and utilized wisely. Mm-hmm. I find family foundations more and more interested in aligning with organizations that first match the interests of the family, but secondly have an ability to report back on what they did. Mm-hmm. And I think that stewardship is a key aspect. Venture philanthropy was the first nod to this concept of bringing business practices to charitable giving, and actually translated the mindset so that shareholders become stakeholders mm-hmm. in a nonprofit enterprise, and I think appropriately hold people accountable. Mm-hmm. It's a good circle. So I think there'll be more of that. And I'll be speaking later today. One of the studies that was done by U.S. Trust on major gift philanthropy includes the fact that many of the nation's wealthiest donors, most affluent donors, give to 8 or more organizations.
Wow.
So they're invested in a number of things, and I think view each with the same degree of interest and accountability.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. So let's say we have one of those sweet, naive, fresh out of college development coordinators sitting in front of us. What would you tell them to do to be ready for where their career might take them over the next several years?
Be open, be interested, be passionate, be aggressive, be positive. One of the early lessons I learned was that you will come across people who will say no to a proposal or a gift request. And the first reaction might be to suggest that they were saying no to me or you personally, when in fact it was not a personal insult or injury. It was simply the fact that our organization or that particular project wasn't the right thing for them at that point in time. And that fortunately there are more people on the prospect list and donor list and membership list than I could possibly ever visit. Yeah, so, dust yourself off, put a smile back on your face, and go see the next person. Because really it is an opportunity to extend the mission. And the other lesson is always leave the room smiling. So even if someone says no, make sure that you're able to say thank you for their time and their consideration, because you never know when down the road that person may remember what a positive experience they had, what passion you had in representing the mission of the enterprise, and they may come to the table.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. That
so go at it. If you're young, go at it. Mm-hmm. Go do it. Find yourself some good books to read. Find yourself some good friends and professionals with whom you can, trade stories and coach one another, and just do what's best for the organization you represent. And if you find yourself at an organization where you're really not aligned with their mission, then find yourself a spot at an organization that does parallel with your priorities and passions, because the people with whom you'll come in contact will recognize early on if you're not as dedicated to the organization as they are.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen that many times. Moving is not a bad thing. So you, when talking about making connections, you've done your fair share of speaking at assorted different conferences. If the
those are assorted different conferences.
Yes,
not sorted.
Oh yes. So if, let's say the conference donor fairy dropped down on all of our listeners and said, I will give you the money to go to 2 national, international conferences this year, but, it has to be for staff development, and you have to use it for this. You can't use it on, operations or your coolest new project. What 2 would you suggest that our listeners go to?
You're gonna put me in a bind in a box.
Or 5, whatever.
I've been involved with CASE, the Council for Advancement and Support of Education. I've been involved with AHP, the American Healthcare Association for Healthcare Philanthropy, AASP, APRA. Depending on where you are and what you need, each one of those organizations offers some very fine educational experiences and opportunities. The Institute for Charitable Giving holds conferences, seminars 3 times a year, and they're quite good and inspirational and practical as well. So I really can't stack one on top of the other. I think I've always made decisions about conferences predicated on the subject matter being taught and the people and the reputation of the speakers. Mm-hmm. And given limited resources both for the seminar and travel, it's a matter of picking the one that's going to have the greatest rate of return in the short term.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Scott. I really appreciate it, being at the conference and also joining us on 501 Crossroads.
Thank you for the work you're doing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So our contact information is pretty easy. It's Panas, P-A-N-A-S, Linzy, L-A-N-Z-Y.com. That's the website. There's a contact form there. The convention for meeting or emailing any of our partners is simply the first and last name followed by @panaslinzy.com. Mm-hmm. So in my case, it's Scott, S-C-O-T-T, Lange, L-E-N-G-E. And I'd be delighted to respond to any questions that people may have.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
And thank you to all of you for joining us on 501 Crossroads. 501 Crossroads is recorded at the studios of Mind's Eye Radio and is produced and hosted by me, Marjorie Moore. Mike Curtis is our sound engineer. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher or your favorite app and subscribe and leave us some feedback so others can find us. You can find us on Facebook at 501 Crossroads. Thank you for listening, and remember, we're all working towards the same outcomes.